Great. Well, I think we're good to go. So let's start with introduction. So thanks for joining, everybody. This is the next in our monthly series of security synopsis webinars. To remind everybody of the drill, this is all about where typically I interview somebody, a name from the cybersecurity industry. Really pleased to be joined by Luigi today. Luigi and I have worked a little bit together in the past, and we'll be doing a lot more here at Node4. But Luigi, why don't you tell us about yourself? Thanks for joining from Milan, by the way. I'm pleased to say we've got an international flavor. We've got an Italian guy joining from. Sorry, you're joining from Madrid, aren't you? Sorry, not Milan.
Madrid. Today,
We've got an
Madrid,
Italian
yes.
guy joining from Spain just to prove that the internet is truly a global thing and it doesn't start in Derby and end in Nottingham. So, Luigi, I'll shut up. Could you introduce yourself, your bit of your background, and just give us one sentence on what Bfore.ai does, please?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank Andy for inviting us. So you said it. I'm Italian. I actually live in France, even if today I'm here in Madrid. So definitely multicultural is one of my characteristic. I've been in this industry for 40 years. Put my finger on the keyboard when I was 4 years old. It was a mechanical keyboard for the ones that remember IBM M. By the way, it still works. I still use that keyboard. And had a lot of experiences in infrastructure, working for companies like Dell, like Quest Software. And then a few years ago, kind of sad that cybersecurity was such a reactive industry. I thought, why don't we try and do something more predictive, more trying to foresee what's coming rather than being on a victim, kind of reactive stance. And so before I was born, and we provide predictive cybersecurity services, both from a threat intelligence perspective, where we can identify future sources of attack in average a couple of weeks before the attack starts, and from a brand and reputation protection perspective, where we are able to identify and stop as well those attacks before any victim is made. And I'm sure we'll cover some of this in today's topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other than that, very happy to be here and hear your questions.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Luigi. And we'll carve out some time so we get questions from the audience. And clearly, I've got a few things to get us going. And just to resonate with that, for those of you on the call who know me one way or the other, I get frustrated that the idea of cybersecurity is somebody attacks your firewall every day. So the closer we can get to criminals and taking domains down gives us a false multiplier, makes you safer, makes the planet safer. It's got to be the way to go. So I guess to kick us off, AI has been in the news, particularly at the time of recording. I'm bored with the amount of times I've heard ChatGPT on the news this week. So AI, just tell us a little bit about it's in the company name, but how are you using AI to help to fight the criminals? Because this wasn't happening probably 10 years ago. So talk us through that if you could, Luigi.
Yeah, so I always love more talk about what we provide our customers rather than how we do it, but we definitely use a mix of algorithms that are part of the AI family, from machine learning to supervised learning to belief propagation and so on and so forth. But technically, what you have is a system that can crunch an inordinate amount of data and create relationship between these data over time. And that's really is about our innovation. We don't look at data statically, but we look at behaviors of infrastructure. And the way to think to it about what we do, it's like weather forecast systems. We observe a ton of data on the internet on a daily basis. This information over time is converted by the algorithms in behaviors. So an infrastructure behavior could be, maybe an infrastructure that was live and then 6 months ago changed the name server, and a few days later an IP address is added to the DNS, and then maybe a few days farther later there is certain traffic going to another infrastructure, and so on and so forth, right? So this series of activities make a behavior, and our system catalog behavior. We have more than 1 billion of them. Then we train the system to recognize good and bad behavior, and then we identify infrastructure that get too close to bad behavior to inform our customers about them, so that they can either block access and communication or set alerts to be informed that their system are talking to those malicious infrastructures, or we can do things to make them inactive so that we protect the general public and customers of our customers
And I
so on.
wanted to go into that because I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, the domain takedown industry has been around as far as I can see for around 20 years, probably longer. But to play that back, I guess if somebody were to impersonate Node4, so they had a 0 instead of an O, that's difficult to find, yeah. But what you do is, so I guess the Node4 domain has some characteristics. The IP address has probably been static for 10 years. The DNS registry's got a great TTL, all that kind of complicated stuff. But if you're a criminal, I think one of the fundamentals is criminals, I think we know, are lazy, so they would use the same IP address for 10,000 phishing domains. They last for 36 hours. So you look for that kind of high speed activity, for want of a better word, that allows you to fish out, if you pardon the pun, with an F, not PH, fish out the bad domains from the good domains and then go for it there. Yeah. Is that a reasonable synopsis, I guess?
Yeah, that's a simple, the behavior are a little bit more complicated than that, but one thing that really helps is that criminal, you said it very well, they are lazy, and they will use scripting and programmatic tools to create those malicious infrastructure. So there are actually a sequence of activity that they perform to set up server, move them from one cloud to another, get to the domain, configure the MX, and so on and so forth. So all these very complicated set of changes can be recognized, but if you had humans try to do that, it would just be, you need more than an army and it would be too slow. That's where the AI, going to back to your early question, helps, because it is meant to manage the relationship of so much data and identify and forecast where the data is going.
And that's helpful. So I think on one of the previous webinars where we interviewed a dark web company, one of my strap lines is, the day when a 15-year-old boy in his bedroom in Belfast can take down TalkTalk are gone. Those things don't happen anymore. So criminals operate as gangs. I think what I get from what you said is, if there's 1 million criminals out there, there's probably 10,000 criminal gangs, but each gang has got a particular signature way of working, and you're looking for those patterns as well, which is cool.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't necessarily do the attribution part, as in trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah, that's the
We
law
rather
enforcement to
focus
do
on
it.
avoid that they make any damage. But it's definitely what you're describing there. We identify pattern of activities and then associate them with nascent or emergent activity, right? So, but
But
what you said is very relevant. Is today in the criminal underworld, there is an ecosystem, and very similar to what in the clear world we have with startups, right? So you have small teams of very clever people that decided to produce some specific software, and then they try to sell to other people in different business model. We have heard recently of ransomware as a service, royalties on the results of the ransom, and so on and so forth.
yeah,
There are
criminals pay
funders,
commission. Yeah,
so
just like everybody else, criminals are paying commission out there. I mean,
there are even call it venture capital, right?
yeah,
So the mafias and the organized crime of the world invest in these people because they need time, and there are jobs, right? There are community managers for dark web forums, and there are it's actually very, it's definitely not the single person in the garage, albeit that still exists, right? And I would still be very worried about 13 and 15-year-olds. I remember what I did when I was at that age, and they are extremely resourceful. But unfortunately, it's becoming more and more organized, more and more structured, more and more complicated to face. And that's why we are so happy when we expose those malicious infrastructure, and we know how much time and effort and resources have gone into it, and they are made unuseful. For example, if we publish the data on VirusTotal, then there is obviously we're making their life very, very miserable, and
yeah.
that's kind of the fun part of
It's
the job.
about suffocating the oxygen from the criminal fire. I mean, help me with one thing,
Yeah.
Luigi. So when I've in my days in telco tried to get people to take domains down, the conversation around false positives is always there. So
Sure.
what can people on this call do to make sure their domains, they're good domains? Because we've not invited any criminals to today's webinar, bizarrely. So if I'm running, what can Node4 do to make our domain stand out as being as legitimate as possible, so that your algorithms know that we're the good guys, and then it makes it easier for you to find the bad sites?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do much because the system will, identify that as benign. It's actually one of the things we are most proud of is our false positive rate is less than 0.05%. It means that on 10,000 prediction, only 5 will be wrong. That said, more than taking care about what we do, I think it's still very important and unfortunately not very common that people secure their DNS. They have a DNS hygiene. So from simple things like DNSSEC and TLS certificates from reputable sources to the more advanced that I strongly really recommend DMARC, SPF, and BIMI. BIMI is this new standard where you can associate a logo with a domain, and that logo will show up in mail systems so that you can basically certify that that email is coming from the
It's
original
like a
source.
watermark, for want of a better word.
Exactly. Those things are very simple, to implement, but they require time, of course, and expertise to do it. But they are so important, and unfortunately, the vast majority of organizations are still not adopting those basics things. I would say that before being worried about someone creating impersonation of from a bad domain perspective, what you should be more worried first is let's not your own domain get hijacked and be used against you. That's unfortunately so common still, right? So the two things go hand in hand. But I would say start by securing your own domain and let company like us protect you from
So
others without
DNS
worrying
lock
too much
and
about
those kind
that.
of things. So I like that, and it's something I wasn't thinking we could talk about, but let's do it. That, as you say, the amount of criminals who can hijack the DNS. So in our case, they would take the genuine Node4.co.uk and turn it into a criminal site. Without me
Even
mentioning
even
them.
even worse than that, there is many companies use a technique of pre-registering domains they will never use just to avoid others to register their domain. But then they leave these domains they have registered unsecure. And so here is the funny thing. It's easier to take control of a protective domain of a large company and scam them than create a fake domain and use it for scam. So, so these
Let
protective domains are very dangerous. They're supposedly protective, but they actually create even more risk. They expand your attack surface, right? So maybe we'll get to a moment to talk about it, but we are working now on a future product to block the registration of domains,
well, look,
and that will be kind of solving a bit of these problems.
Well,
So,
let me play that back because I like that. So I think I'm going to talk about the Node4 domain because I'm not going to talk about any customer domains for
yeah,
obvious reason. But so what I think I've heard there is if we register node4.com and node4.co, which obviously wants to do, that's the classic protection thing. You spend a few pounds, you got the domain. People forget that they've done that. They forget to turn on domain lock, demarc, wah, and then people actually impersonate because it is a legitimate domain that's out there. If
exactly.
anybody were to check, like you see it's legitimate. They've made a Node4 spoof website. So ironically, when people are trying to do a good thing in this space, they're actually causing more self harm than not registering the domain
Yeah,
in the first place. Because it's not the
it's
same thing.
obviously it's a practice that's been it's as old as the domain industry. It is one of the protective domain.
Yeah.
But what has changed is the security context has become much more aggressive, and the practices of securing the protected domain hasn't followed. Right? I mean, we're talking about the main domain not being secure. It's kind of automatic that the protected one are even less secure, right? So, the more you have attack surface, the more stuff you have to manage and control. It's a big, the risk
The
increase,
more
and
you
and
are
I think that's
likely
the
to.
part where people ignore it. So.
Yeah, and you're more likely to forget your GoDaddy password and not turn on MFA, and then one day somebody's taken that domain that you forgot about 5 years ago, kind of thing. So it's the classic. I'm afraid to
As
say
well, because
it's the classic IT boring stuff of just keeping your house in good order
sure,
is one of the basics.
asset management, absolutely, yeah, asset inventory and asset management is just a different type of assets. So
And I tell you what we'll do. So we do have a guide, a Node4 guide to free security, and some of these things you've said, I think we'll capture into that and send around because I appreciate we're going, quite deep into quite a specialist world. But I think one of the things we like to do in this call is sometimes scare the pants off people and then give people a solution. So, I think we're all aware of somebody having a spoof domain, but somebody taking over your main company domain. And several years ago, just a small war story, a council in the UK, who shall remain nameless, I think somebody took over their domain and was selling, it was exactly the same domain, but they'd taken some spare pages and were selling Viagra. And I tried to get hold of the CIO of this organization. And because I put the word Viagra in the email, I had to phone them up because he kept blocking my email, even though they were actively selling Viagra on a council website. So I think, but yeah, what you just said there is the DEFCON scenario that, you know, all of Node4 in our case is now selling weapons on the dark web, and we find out because we haven't got any website traffic. So help me with this one, and there's a few questions around this. So when you take a domain down, I presume you go to the registries and the registrars. I've mentioned GoDaddy, CentralNick, Nominet, those kind of folks. Are there good people and bad people in the industry? Does some tell you to go away? You know, I think there's 3,000
Yeah, so
domains now. So how does it work? Is where I'm at.
yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, the takedown has many different facets, right? So you mentioned the pure domain takedown that is going to the registrar, going to maybe the registry, and that's one way of doing the takedown. Before you get to there, you need to go and check the web hoster, the email hosters, potentially this could be a legit domain that's where the DNS has been hijacked and a subdomain is now pointing to another bad rogue infrastructure. So now you have to go to the legit domain owner, get them to realize that their DNS has been hijacked, right? So there is a multifaceted things. If we focus on the ultimate, the nuclear, if you want, solution, that is to go to the registrar and get the domain removed from the DNS or client hold or NX domain, that are the two phases of the process. Indeed, there are registrars that are more keen to fight the abuse. I'm definitely happy to mention, for example, Namecheap, that in the last 24 months has really done a fantastic job, and they are faster. I mean, we can do takedown with them in less than 5 minutes now. So
Oh, wow.
from the moment we do the prediction to the moment they actually shut down the domain, a total of 5 minutes is just outstanding.
And just to jump in, Luigi,
Unfortunately,
sorry to jump in there. So about 2 years ago, Namecheap had such a bad name in the industry, which is where criminals were. So I guess it's good. So for the cynics out there who say people won't do this, I was always cynical about Namecheap. So I've been out of this space for about a year, but so to know that they've changed their position quite actively is good news. So the
absolutely,
internet
and we
is
need
actually
to do
getting cleaner.
even more
Is the good news there?
Yeah, I would say that they are the benchmark in the industry today, at least
Right.
from the perspective we see, because obviously we interact with most of those
Yeah.
actors, right? Um, then you have, there is really a spectrum, right? So where you go on the other opposite, there are, some state-owned registrar in North Korea or Iran or other places that are totally, against. I mean, they are totally fostering abuse, we can say,
I
right?
think we all know
And
to block Iran and block North Korea, maybe, and a lot of people block Russia just for that
yes.
reason, don't they? Which makes complete sense.
Yeah, I mean it's a way to do. Unfortunately, these bad registrars are all over the place, not
Yeah.
just simply from a geographical perspective. It comes to mind, the .tk TLD, that is a free TLD, and it's an extremely difficult one to do takedowns on because they just don't make any money on it, so they don't spend any time keeping it clear. But anyway, you know let's say that the industry, I think, is definitely going in a direction of fighting the abuse. There's a lot of different initiatives. Registrars of different sizes are all kind of coming to the point where they realize that it's so important to keep their registry clean, because it goes about their reputation, about the reputation of internet, and to avoid that there will be stronger and more complicated policy, like what we are seeing now coming in these two and the likes, that would remove that autonomy that they have had for so many years. Let's say today organization suffer from the delay of takedown. If there is a fishy domain against the bank and it takes 4 months to do the takedown, then that's a
It's too
big
late.
problem. And that's why we came up with this other capability that we call the active defense. Active defense is a network of goodwill, if you want, where we inform partners like Quad9 DNS, like VirusTotal, like many other big names in the industry, Google, Microsoft, and so on, and they use our input to block access to those malicious domain. In, say, maybe in 30 minutes, we get about 60% of the internet traffic, they get blocked. And so now what's happening is that fishy domain that impersonates the bank gets in your mailbox, you are distracted, so you click on it, but nothing happens because you get the red screen from Chrome saying, this is a fishy domain, or you get the blue one, right? And here is where really our power of predicting future attack and informing those players before the attack starts, right, really shine, right? Of course, in the back end, we're still doing the takedown, and eventually we get the domain disabled completely, because there is the other 40% of internet is still unfortunately reaching it. But at least we greatly reduce, especially in the big public, retail, consumer, small businesses that are less protected, and maybe they don't have those kind of rule of thumb blockings that you were mentioning. We're still covering them. So that's that. I would say that the industry is improving, but we still need this type of capability for some time before it's totally abuse proof.
And that's great news. If I to show you my notes, I was going to say, do you interface with people like Quad9? So I think you've answered that one straight away. So for the benefit of those on the call, if you've not heard me talk about this before, so Quad9 and Quad1 are DNS services. We encourage all customers to point their DNS to Quad9. It's a thing we're working on as well. So as Luigi said, it's great that you're giving the data on the bad domains, the bad guys and girls, to people like Quad9. What we found, and I found personally, is criminals actually use Quad9 and they see when their domain's been blocked. They then stop their phishing campaign and go somewhere else. So this is always going to be a game of whack-a-mole. But yeah, again, for the cynics out there, I think when I've talked about this subject over maybe the past 6 years, the conversation was the registries and registrars will never take bad domains down. They're making too much money. Namecheap, as you say, were a name that had a bad reputation. So I think so far we've learned that that's changed and they are doing it. But I think the power of Quad9 and Quad1 to let the criminals know that they've been found out. It's like you told the criminals that the police know you live at number 27 Acacia Avenue. You moved to number 38 Acacia Avenue, but at least it's, as you say, it's forcing the criminals on. So that's great. Tell me about
It's making their life more miserable as well, right? So because
exactly.
they have to invest time and resources, and these people, they search the path of least friction. So that, anything you can do to make their life a little bit harder will keep them away from you.
No, totally. And I want to ask you a difficult question around that on behalf of the industry in a second. But I guess one other thing I want to touch on is the dark web. So I think a few webinars ago, we interviewed one of our partners who's deep in the dark web. So you do well indexing these things in the web that we all know and love. But is the dark web a space you get into? Is that somewhere you're thinking of going, or is it just technologically
Not,
too different?
yeah, not directly, because for us, dark web means the attack is really close to happen, if not happened already. So it is really not aligned with our pre-crime capability. But we do have a new capability that is kind of connected, as in as we have the ability to see the future attack forming, we can, by monitoring those infrastructure, identify, for example, where a phishing kit is being loaded on a server. And as it's being deployed, we can actually look at how the phishing kit is made, and without going into much details, otherwise we let the people know how to prevent it. But basically, we can find a way to collect the information the phishing kit is collecting, and then turn it over to the right owners, maybe the bank that has had one of their customers leaving on that phishing kit a credit card, so that they can do something about it. And so in this process, we have access to Telegram channel, we have access to some dark forum where the phishing kit are pushing the data, and so on and so forth, right? So we don't, I would say it's not the primary source of data for our pre-crime, but it's a place where we monitor to complete the product.
Right. So I guess if I gave a recommendation there, it would be working with people who understand the dark web, which clearly we've talked about in previous webinars,
Totally.
and working with domain takedown. It almost sounds like one is the satellite to forecast the weather, and you're the weather radar. You know the cloud's about to come over in the next few days, and dark web is about getting 100 days further out. When as you say, criminals are starting to think about stuff. I think a theme we're getting from these webinars is, and a theme obviously I love, is that this is very much about not dealing with the attacks on 0 day when they're coming to you. It's that there's enough intelligence out there on the internet if we know the right people to look to see when something's happening, as you say, T minus 10 days, T minus 50, T minus 100 days before. So at the risk of quoting Tom Cruise in Minority Report,
you touch on one.
crime.
You touch on one of my pet peeve, right? So I think one of the problem of the industry is that we have done a bit of guardrail to guardrail, right? So a few years ago, it was all about prevention, firewall, and so on and so forth. Now everybody's about assume breach, detect, respond, be resilient, and then they don't do anything for prevention and preparation. I think that we need to strike a balance.
Yeah.
The detection response is extremely important. Not everything can be prevented and predicted, but if we can do more prediction and preemption, then we let the people that do detection and response work better, because we remove a lot of activities that could be eliminated from the risk profile of the company, so that they focus on the one that cannot be prevented, and there will be less false positive, and they will be more effective, and they will not need to be challenged by resource, because the amount of volume will be smaller that they need to analyze as well. So I think that balance at the moment is totally off, all toward detection and response. And we hope to bring a little bit more weight on prediction and preemption.
No, totally. And just to jump in, I'll remind everybody on the call to think about some questions, because I do want to open this up for the floor. I suddenly remember after half an hour, I'm getting so into talking to Luigi that other people will want to ask questions. But while people are thinking about that, yeah, it's exactly that. We used to fight fires, and now we get into fire prevention. We used to deal with heart attacks, and now we get into looking after your heart. Yet in cyber, we just seem to run for the defibrillator, which is the firewall every day. And yeah, so it's good to hear we're all driving in the same direction.
We have fantastic firefighters in cybersecurity. I mean, there's people that are really, really good to do detection and then do things to mitigate it, right? I just don't think organization like fires at all. And maybe we should do more to avoid the fire to start with.
I mean, I'm allowed to say this, being a techie myself, like you. I think we all love a bit of adrenaline, and once you've used all of your adrenaline up, you realise this is a marathon, not a sprint. Then you wish you hadn't got into the adrenaline game. But I think sometimes it can be fun dealing with that crisis, and dealing with a crisis every day, as we all know, is not fun. So no, that's cool. One thing I wanted.
Let's confine that into red and blue teaming
Yeah.
exercises.
Yeah, then we can have simulated fun. I mean, a stat I heard some years ago was that the credit card, the HTTPS thing, not credit card, padlock. So I used to always tell my mum that if she went to a website with a padlock, it was safe. I think we now know, and it's coming back to one of your earlier points, that there are more criminals using SSL and HTTPS, i.e., the padlock, than legitimate sites. So back to your point about how you find legitimacy, I think we're there, but how do we encourage people to do that? Because it really annoys me that I still find customers, I still find legitimate websites where they haven't turned those things on. So actually, I've told my mother to always look for the padlock. Now that more criminals are using it than legitimate businesses, I've had to tell her the opposite, and she's like, "Will you not make your mind up? What's going on with the internet?" So how do we
Yeah, I
how
mean,
do we get them to do the basics? I guess is the question again.
yeah, I mean, it's really about cyber awareness, isn't it? I mean, it's unfortunately this is just thing that need to be repeated over and over and over again. Of course, there are things that can be automated. And, there is also in some cases legislation. Last year, for example, the SEC, imposed to boards of public company to basically be responsible for cybersecurity. And that means that they need to, the board is now going to ask difficult questions to the CEO and the CISOs, and hence they'll be more attentive, right? So if you take this down at a lower level, there are fantastic resources like the GCA, so Global Cyber Alliance Small Business Toolkit, that give those very good, best practices to follow. And I think, we just have to communicate more on it. There is this the month of October where there's the Cyber Awareness Month. We just released it for Christmas, a kids book, so that parents that want to spend a bit of time with their kids, they can tell a tale about cybersecurity, and in a funny way. And we need to start from
We need to
the
start
very
from 5 year olds.
early stage of training.
Yeah, you said you first touched the keyboard when you were 4. So what's the book called? I'd not heard that one.
The book is called um, it's on our website, so I can't remember the name now. It's the but it's a very nice tale. It's very easy. You go on our website, resource, download. and it's free. You don't have to put even an email address. There is no paywall or registration wall or anything else. It's for, I would say, 4 to 8 years old. Nice pictures and everything else. So here you go. The king, the knight, and the snowball. Thank Roger. Really appreciate it.
There you go. He's on it. I think there's going to be loads of IT directors who want to read it just in case they're missing some stuff. Because I mean, we found that the amount of people who missed the basics. We found one customer whose admin passwords were the admin's name with a number at the end, and we've seen other people out there with the same internet server, to your earlier point, with the same password and the same IP address since 2015, and it only recently got hacked. So weak password on the password on the server on the internet. It disturbs me that I think as an industry we get excited about the new cool funky stuff and don't do the basics. So I think it's a good comparison that we started today's chat talking about artificial intelligence, and then we've landed, as we often do, that you should do the basics well and then move from there. Maybe an awkward commercial question, and again, I want you to answer this on behalf of the whole takedown industry and maybe yourselves. But so let's say we find 1,000 bad domains in our SOC. You charge people money to take domains down. That's how you make your money. But then you also altruistically share that out with people like Quad9, with people like ourselves, so that we can block things and keep customers safer. So there's always a difficult balance between the commercial world and doing the right thing. How do you do that? And if I give you 1,000 domains, you're going to charge me 1,000 times something. If I find them just because I was looking at a bad site and I thought to tell someone, I could tell NCSC, I could tell my nation state organization. How do you interface with those guys? What would we do? So that was a very long, rambling question that allows you to explore the whole commerciality of your industry, I guess.
Yeah, and I have the ambition to speak for the industry. It's so varied and different. But from my perspective, what we are really providing is a service. Is the speed, is the automation, is the fact that it's controlled, that that you ask us and it get done. By the way, we do charge only on performance complete, so only once the takedown is completed. So if takedown go forever and it doesn't get completed, then the customer doesn't get charged, right? So it's we align our risk to them, and so yes, definitely everybody can try and do a takedown on their own. Go through the tedious process, try to get the registrar attention. The reality of it is large organization, medium-sized organization, but even very small organization that have the risk, they're better off with a professional taking care of it. And in parallel, we do provide those feeds. We call it the pre-crime community network feed to organizations like Code9, like GCA, VirusTotal, and so on. And we do that because we want to help the community, get more safe and so on. The only difference between the key difference between the commercial feed that we give to customer and those feeds that goes into those other solution, the community feed, is one of speed, right? So our customer get real time or daily updates. We publish our prediction into those other venues with a delay that varies between 15 to 21 days. In most cases, still extremely good because most attack take months to be prepared. Our average today between the prediction and when the attack actually realizes is 18 days. But we have seen many, many attacks, especially the nasty one, the ransomware, the command and control server, that where our prediction was early by 4, 5, 6 months. And so that feed, even the community feed, is actually quite useful from that perspective still. So it's always a balance, right? So, but from our perspective, it's really more about the service that we provide, the capability itself. There are definitely solutions. If I can recommend, for example, the DNS Institute, NetBeacon. NetBeacon is a free page where you can go declare what you think is a malicious domain and provide the proof, and they will simplify at least the report, because today each registrar if there is one challenge in this industry, is there are tens of thousands of registrars and each one has their own process for reporting, so much so we had to automate it and study each one of them to see what which information we send, how we send it, and so on. So the guys at the DNS Institute with NetBeacon facilitate that part, and they're trying to push a standardization. and we're very much in support and work with them to as much as we can to help, and that at least is just one step easier than do it completely manual going to the register. You have to, first of all, nearly no one know how to find the registrar,
Yeah, it's
and you
tell me
have to go
about it.
into the
Yeah.
GUIs, and we know how messy the GUIs data is since a few years, right? So it's really a tedious and complicated and nasty process, this one of the takedown. And so what we do is charging the simplicity of it that we create.
So I think if there was a strap line here, and this is probably from English TV, this is the "Don't try this at home" message. So I think the message is
Yeah.
come to us
No,
if
no,
you're
no,
an
no.
actual
It
customer.
should be.
We come to you. But and I guess so. So the DNS Institute is some guys. So that was the one founded by GoDaddy and that kind of team, wasn't it? And as you say, is very
No, it's actually an organization. I mean, of course, they have many members, but Graham Bounton is kind of the leader
that's the guy.
of the DNS Abuse Institute. That's the name.
Cool. So that's one which we're planning to connect to. So I guess the big message there is when you take a domain down, I guess it's a bit like threat feeds where you can pay for a threat feed that's instantaneous, but then after a month, it's out there in the free market. That we know that when you do something, there's the right ripples across the internet. You share it with the right people. I think one of the things we obsessed about is NCSC got 127,000 domains taken down in the UK, I think last year. So where's your interface with law enforcement? Because you said all the right names there. So I think what I get from what you said is you have a commercial business to take domains down, as do lots of other people. We're working with you guys. You then share it with the right altruistic community to make sure the criminals are even more chased down, which is brilliant. But yeah, what happens with law enforcement? Because there's 188 countries out there.
Well, so first of all, we are, I would say, we focus really, remember, we are still a 2-year-old company and, growing very, very fast, but, we need to still look very much after our sustainability.
Yeah.
And so our focus is really commercial activity and commercial organization. We work with banks, we work with large manufacturing providers and so on and so forth, medium businesses, small businesses, all of them. But, we need to have how to say, a revenue source to sustain ourselves and keep investing in this technology. So law enforcement, we have had conversation, and if they come to us and they want some information, we may share through the community. Sometimes they engage us more from a commercial discussion. I cannot say that I'm a fan of them because, as you know, public procurement is not exactly compatible with a small company trying to grow. But we are very open. I was in Israel in November at the Homeland and Security event where there were a lot of law enforcement agency, met Europol recently at another event with the European Union, got in touch last year with NCSC. So I wouldn't say that that's our business or that we are focusing on it, but when we can help, we will definitely do, and we
And I
interface with
think
them
I
very
think I've
well.
just given myself an action on this call, which is part of what it's all about. I mean, it would be unfair to ask an Italian guy who lives in France, who's currently in Spain, to interface with NCSC in the UK, whereas that's kind of my job. So I guess as a partnership, Node4 SOC telling the UK authorities, you dealing with the French authorities, I think is the way to get into this global game. So that's brilliant.
And that would be very welcome.
I think we've been talking and we've taken a few questions from the floor, which I've thrown in, and we've 40 minutes has flown by, Luigi, as it always does. So,
Wow.
so that was brilliant. So, unless there's any closing thoughts, I mean, it's the question that you haven't been asked, I guess. If there was a question, one thing you could share with the audience in this space, I think you've been very thorough and very honest. So thanks for that. But are there any closing thoughts or recommendations before we say thanks and advertise the next webinar?
Yeah, I would say, watch this space because we are working on some exciting new capabilities. We'll wait for that we launch it before announcing it, but the objective being going always earlier, right? So we do pre-crime, we do active defense. We're trying to do something even before the criminal even starting to prepare their infrastructure. And I think, if I can give an encouragement in your cybersecurity practice, try to balance more prediction, prevention, preparation, and not stay too much into detection and response, because when you say detection response, you're really a victim. You're waiting for
it's
something
too
to happen to
you're,
do something
you're
about it.
preaching to the converted. For those who've heard our proper sales chat, we talk about prepare, defend, and respond, and it's all about getting into prepare, which is why you're here.
Totally.
One last question from, I think Roger just asked a question I saw flash by that said, have you had any success with working with UK public sector? And I'm going to answer that for you, which is I think we're about to be your UK exclusive partner, which means the success will be down to us rather than you. So I think Roger's question is not yet, but by the time 2023 is over, the plan is that Luigi
we definitely haven't focused on it, but we haven't focused on it, and we count greatly on the might of Node4 to spread the word and the capability in UK as well.
Enthusiasm as opposed to
mostly
might. We love
focused at the moment
enthusiasm, but yeah.
Good. It's a good partnership, and we're definitely looking forward to it. So.
And I think good question, Roger. And I think, as Luigi said, a 2-year-old company using AI to deal with an industry which I've certainly touched in the past and has been 20 years old, I think I've certainly learned things from today's call. So if anybody on the call says they haven't learned something, I thought I was an expert at this space. So you proved me I'm a year out of date, at least, Luigi. So look, thanks again. That was great. Thanks for your candor. We'll probably invite you back before 2023 is over to see how much things have changed, because this is clearly a much faster moving sector than maybe I'd first thought. So thanks, Luigi. Thanks everybody who's tuned in, and those of you who are going to be watching the video later. Just to say, so our next session is with Dan Kaplan, who's from one of our incident response partners, and it's titled Negotiating with Criminals, How Not to Talk to a Hacker. So I think we've talked a lot today about the dark web and ransomware, and yeah, if there's one thing we've got from Luigi and we've got from NCSC and we've got from Searchlight Security, is that there's a lot of conversations happen on the dark web before an attack actually happens. And as Luigi says, when that attack hits your firewall, you could have so listened to that stuff the days before. But again, to touch Luigi's point, the ability to use the dark web and negotiate with criminals in a good way and a legal way to try and get yourself out of the hole when you get in there. Note the word when, not if. I think is again another space which is not talking about firewalls, which is really what this conversation is all about. So yeah, tune in next month. We're always on the third Thursday at midday. But yeah, again, Luigi, I think you've been a model guest, really informed as to your industry, and yes, no, I admire what you're doing. So we'll be working more with you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks everyone, and speak soon. Bye.
Ciao.